You don't have to have a high charisma score to play Baldur's Gate 3. I know that's a contradiction for a lot of people because they think that you have to play the game with a high charisma character. That's just not true. If you've never played Dungeons and Dragons before, one of the most important aspects to role playing in a tabletop game and a CRPG is the fact that not everyone is good at everything. You have a party of adventurers. And one of the most important parts of any party of adventurers is that everyone's good at something, but not everyone is good at everything. And role playing comes from dealing with rolls of the dice that might not necessarily be in your favor and finding interesting ways to come up with solutions to those situations. And I would argue that Baldur's Gate 3, more than any game I've played in a very long time, probably more than any game I've ever played, period, in terms of CRPGs, they have created a game where there is so much replayability here. When they touted that 17,000 different endings and variation things, permutations, I think everybody kind of maybe rolled their eyes a little bit. But after having a couple of weeks to now sink our teeth into the game, it very much has proven to be true in the sense that there are so many different ways that you can do different encounters that it really is very much like an actual tabletop session where the only limit is your imagination. Now, of course, there are limitations because it's programming and there's only so many hours in a day to program things into a game. But they've done an admirable job of creating all of these different permutations, which leads to replayability. I think PC Gamer has an article out actually about how no, you don't need to have perfect stats to run through this game, and that's the beauty of this game. I've seen a lot of people, and I mean it's a significant number on all of my beginner build guide videos where you get the metagaming nerds who come onto the videos and like, why aren't because I never have a high charisma character with like my fighters or my druids or everything. Like my druid that I'm taking through the game right now as the live stream character has a charisma of 10, maybe 12 by now, but it's 10 or 12. It's not that high. Sorcerer, on the other hand, my sorcerer has a high charisma, as does my bard, because those characters have high stats because charisma is their primary stat. But my fighter, my ranger, my druid, oh no, those characters are not meant to have a high charisma, and yet they are still the face of the party. And you'll get the people coming on the videos who are like, "There's just no. You need to dump all of your stats. This needs to be the face of the party. You can't have a face character who doesn't have max charisma." And I would argue that by focusing on having max charisma for every character you build, you are missing out on all of the replayability that Baldur's Gate 3 has to offer. I'm playing a druid through my primary playthrough. I'm playing a sorcerer in my single player playthrough, and then I'm playing a bard in my multiplayer playthrough. And what's really interesting is that out of those three characters, I have gotten significantly different results to pretty much every single major boss encounter in the game so far, and a lot of the minor stuff too. And then, playing multiplayer with Mujin and Babylonia, those guys are getting completely different. Uh, Outcomes on their playthroughs as well, not at well, as well. The need to be perfect at everything takes away from one of the defining components of Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, tabletop gaming in general, which is the the role playing component. If you're good at everything and you never fail and you're always having perfect conversations, you're losing out on the random nature of the dice rolls and figuring out creative solutions to the scenarios. One of the most fun parts of any tabletop game that I've ever played, and I've been DMing campaigns for 35 years at this point, and as a player as well, random reactions and reacting to those things with the people in your party is part of the fun. I actually do when I'm DMing, I have something where I have what I call flavor dice, and it's a homebrew thing. It's not part of the rule sets. And I've done this with Starfinder, I've done this with Dungeons and Dragons, I've done this with every tabletop game I've ever DM'd. And the random flavor dice that I use, it's just a D6. And the easy way to think about this is that the 6 on the d6 is in favor of the DM or the enemy, and a 1 is in favor of the player characters. So anytime you're in a situation and you're playing, and we come up with something where, let's say we go into a tavern and the player characters want to interact with somebody at the bar, they do so and they have a critical failure as an example. They roll a 1. Well, rather than having that be an automatic failure, I will then roll a flavor die to see, well, how bad was the failure? Was it detrimentally bad? Did they roll a 6 and now I got to do something really crazy? Or did they roll a 1 and it's just they accidentally spilled beer on somebody when they meant to pick up their tankard. You know what I mean? Like those kind of things. And if it's a one in combat, rather than have it be just an automatic miss, which it will miss, but you add some flavor to it. You roll the die and see, well, how bad of a failure was it? Do you shoot your friend instead of the mob? And similarly, when the mob rolls a 1, what happens then? Does it hit one of its friends? Does it drop its sword? Like, how do we do these flavor dies? And anytime when we're playing a campaign, anytime there is a moment where I'm not quite sure what to do, roll the die. Let the die determine the outcome of any given scenario. That's what tabletop gaming is. Tabletop gaming is not having an automatic success at everything. I saw somebody the other day, I laughed so hard. They literally said, why, and he argued with me in the comments, why can't I have an automatic success when I have an 18 stat here? Why can't I have an automatic success? It's not fair. This is what they said. It's not fair that I have a 5%, whatever the chance was, of failure. That's not fair. I've put all this time and effort into having 18 stats and all this gear and all these other things. I shouldn't ever fail. Why not? Why shouldn't you fail? Any adventure story you've ever read, even the gods fail. That's the beautiful thing. Look at Hercules as an example. Hercules failed tons of times in his adventures. Zeus failed, right? Like, if there was never any failure, the story is boring. If all you ever do is succeed at every single roll, every single encounter, every single conversation, that's boring. There's nothing there. There's no fun to be had in that, I would argue. For some people, they will say, no, that's how I get my enjoyment out of the game. All right, that is a fair point. But at the same time, it's not the spirit of tabletop gaming. And that's one of the things that I think Larian has captured incredibly well is the spirit of tabletop and of Dungeons and Dragons. And Dungeons and Dragons has that random element of dice in it where you're meant to fail sometimes. You're meant to have the odds be against you sometimes. And yes, having a high stat in something can help you have a better chance of success in any given scenario. But if you're trying to make a godlike character every time, you're literally missing out. You are literally, there's content that you're leaving on the table that you're not seeing because you're not willing to take the risk of failing. Because here's the thing, part of the variations of Baldur's Gate 3 are the failures. And there are some really brilliant moments that happen when you fail in this game, whether it's failing a conversation, failing in a fight. Sometimes I was up against Ketherick Thorm the other day, one of the big bad boss fights, one of the big fights. And I only had a 45% chance to land, I think it was heat armor spell on him, and I hit and it landed and he dropped his weapon. He immediately was nullified in that fight. Like, yeah, he does some spells, but without his hammer, he can't do any damage with against me. So it's like those are the little things where he failed. He had a critical failure on his save, and as a result, I was able to succeed. But other times it's been like there have been I think there was one fight we did. I'm trying to remember which one it was. It wasn't the Grimforge fight. The Grimforge fight took us a couple of tries. Um, Maybe it was the fight right before the owlbear, or not the fight, but that conversation you have with Edwin and the siblings before the owlbear fight. Like, we went in the live stream and we just kept reloading that and doing it different ways during a live stream to see all the different ways that we could succeed or fail at that given encounter. And there have been other encounters where we've done that and we have found 6, 7, 8 different versions of those encounters during live streams. And that's the beauty of what Larian Studios has produced here. So I would argue that anyone out there who's trying to make the perfect face character every single time, you're leaving a ton of content on the table and you're taking away the role playing element of the game by being unwilling to fail from time to time. That's just my point of view. Now, I know not everyone agrees with that, and that's fine. You're totally free to play the game however you want. But tabletop, Dungeons and Dragons, the roll of the dice, the randomness of it, reacting to those random elements, being forced to think on the fly and come up with creative solutions to those fail moments, that's part of what Dungeons and Dragons is. And it's especially fun when you do it with friends. So if you haven't played multiplayer yet, I would argue that you need to get on it right away. And if you haven't ever played tabletop at a table with other people, or even virtual tabletop these days, get on it. There's so much fun to be had. And that's the beauty of like going back to Baldur's Gate 1, one of the coolest things about that game was you could actually have a character whose intelligence was so low, he couldn't talk in conversations. It was amazing. Trying to have a face character, like your main character, trying to have a character who's leading the party who can't talk to the people around you, so he's like, because he's just too stupid. It's hilarious. There are great moments to be had if you're willing to get out of the box and get out of that meta aspect of, I need to have an 18 charisma, otherwise I can't play the game. Love to hear your thoughts. Drop them down below. Like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss an update. Daily streams at 11 a.m. Don't forget the Discord. We'll see everybody in the next video. Till next time, everybody. Check out the links below. See you guys.